Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Thank you so much for joining infoVia in partnership with Ignition for today's webcast, Data Warehouse and Data Vault Adoption Trends, Modeling, Modernization, and Automation. I'm Ashley Howell, and I'm pleased to be the moderator on today's call. And I'm excited to introduce you to today's presenters. First, we have Mike Kalusek. He is infoVia's Chief Operating Officer. As COO, Mike is responsible for all aspects of the company's performance, including strategic planning, partnership development, client care, and product strategy. He's had a lengthy career that he leverages leading technology organizations for Fortune 100 firms like Fidelity, National Financial, and United Health Group. Mike, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
We also have Julian Redmond. Julian Redmond leads the team at Ignition in Australia, has the region's Data Vault authorized training provider, as well as the developer of Iris Data Vault automation tooling. They help customers more quickly use information management maturity curve by utilizing Data Vault 2.0 methodology. Julian has over 20 years in the data management space and is a regular contributor to the DVIC community platform. And we're very excited that he's here to share his knowledge with us today. Thanks, Julian, for being on today's webcast.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
So just a couple logistics before we get into the bulk of the presentation. All lines have been muted, but we really would love to get an answer, any questions that you might have. So at any point during the presentation, when you've got a question that pops into your head, please simply use that Q&A. We have the Q&A box. We've allocated 15 minutes at the conclusion of our webcast to get to your questions. If we do not get to your questions today, we'll be sure to follow up one-on-one. A copy of this presentation, as well as the Bark and Eckerson survey that we'll be referencing and talking through the results, will also be shared with all attendees at the conclusion of the event. So today's agenda is going to go something like this. We're going to begin talking through the adoption trends, and then talk through data modeling and modernization strategies. Then we'll really get into the thick of the automation tools and technologies. And then Mike and Julian are going to share some success stories and case studies that they've seen. And then we'll end with leveraging strategic partners and then get to your questions. So today's webinar, again, comes from a report with Eckerson Group that they wrote in collaboration with Bark that studied the results of 239 analytic and data practitioners that were surveyed in 2023. Mike and Julian's perspectives and key takeaways we're really going to dig into today. Let's start by just getting Mike and Julian's perspectives on these priorities that surface to the top. Mike, let's start with you. What are your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, one of the big things that we see with all of our clients is really what drives their critical issues is oftentimes pain points. A lot of the stakeholders that we work with either are new to their organizations and they've been given a mandate to modernize their data strategy, or simply to build their first data warehouse because they've reached a tipping point in their evolution as an organization. And so really what we're trying to do is help those organizations be successful very quickly. A lot of times they are looking for rapid delivery of value. And so we really focus on how do we get them ROI quickly without disrupting their other operations that are going on. And so a lot of times what we're doing is we're focusing on bringing in automation, helping them to understand how to look at their strategy holistically, and then really how to empower their analytics teams to start delivering those critical decision points that their organizations are looking for. And ultimately, we're looking to do these validations very quickly early on. There's really no reason why we can't be, seeing things on the BI side of the equation very early in the process so that we can start validating that the right decisions have been made and we're on the right course, and then we continue to evolve through that implementation. So really, just maybe to restate it, we're helping organizations develop rapid ROI simply so that they can continue to move forward and start delivering on those mandates that they've been given.
Thanks, Mike. And Julian, I'd like to ask you, why do you think these are the priorities of data strategy, and what do you see as the different drivers?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the survey that was done really was looking at and talking to organisations that are but probably large enough to have a data warehouse or have already made the step to having a data warehouse. And so it's not surprising that these are the types of challenges. I mean, data quality, for instance, is everyone has that problem. And this is really trying to tie it to making sure that the platform that's being built is actually delivering and delivering rapidly and those sorts of things. But I think one step up from this is actually linking it to the actual organizational strategy, and tying that in, and understanding the value that you're trying to deliver to the business. So maybe that's thinking about it as far as what's the business case for actually going into one of these projects, and really trying to tie what's the business outcome that you're after, and is that actually linked to your corporate strategy? Can you actually follow the value tree all the way down to the initiative that's driving you to actually manage your information? And then these types of functional challenges will surface, but there's, obviously, if you have the right partner, you have the right people, you have the right approach, then these are just challenges to overcome, and there's ways to do that. But I think really the critical thing is really understanding what your corporate strategy is, how this is tied in, what type of analytics you want to actually create, and where you want those analytics to be delivered. Are they being embedded into apps or onto your website? Is it just BI reporting? Is there more to it than what you may initially think? Because I think setting yourself up with a platform and an approach that's flexible, so that you can not only deliver the plans for today, but the strategy for tomorrow, is really important.
Great, thanks, Julian. So let's talk through the Bark and Eckerson survey found the following reasons for adopting the data vault. Mike, when you're talking to clients, what do you find as the primary reasons for choosing to implement data vault and a data warehouse strategy?
Yeah, kind of like what I was saying before about rapid delivery of ROI. A lot of times, organizations, as they're considering alternative approaches, one of the big compelling factors for them is what's going to get me to delivering value to my stakeholders the fastest. And a lot of times those big visions require rapid validation. And one of the things that Data Vault gives you is the ability to iterate through your evolution of architecting and implementing your Data Vault. And so what it ultimately ends up resulting in is that you can do validations very early on, where a lot of the competing methodologies, you spend months and sometimes years building out your data warehouse before you really get to see whether or not you've done it the right way and gotten the real value out of it. And it takes months before you can even start delivering basic value to your stakeholders. So that's a big part of it as well. The other big piece of it here, and this gets into the team skills piece of it, is every organization goes through a lot of turnover over the years. And ultimately, what tends to happen with a data architecture is it becomes this brittle black box that nobody wants to touch. They're afraid that they're going to break something if they touch it, and they start building around it rather than continue to evolve that body of knowledge. And so the nice thing about Data Vault is it really gives you the ability to, because of its prescriptive nature, it gives you the ability to evolve your data over time, so that 5 years into your Data Vault, you're still creating what looks like a first-class citizen, and it looks very similar to what was done the first year of that evolution as well. So I'd say those are probably two of the biggest pieces. And then lastly, on the consulting side, is most organizations want to get it right the first time. They have to get it right the first time. And we see a lot of organizations kind of tend to repeat some of the same errors from time to time. And what we do is we come in and we help them to see, hey, this is what most people get wrong. Let's help you get it right from the beginning. And that's why, having that key partner in place from the beginning, coaching you through that process, is so critical, so that you don't tend to trip over the same things that most organizations trip over.
Thanks, Mike. Julian, anything you want to add here on reasons for adopting data vault?
Yeah, I think Mike hit it on the head. The challenges we're trying to solve, we were solving them 20 years ago as well, and we'll still be solving them in 20 years' time. Managing information is not easy, and errors and quality issues and referential issues and all these things creep in over time. And having a standard process that can adapt to business changes is critical. So, and I think that's why Data Vault is essentially the same methodology as it was 20 years ago, with lots of updates, but because it works, and it gives you that framework. It's technology agnostic, so it can move as technology moves on. It can move with it, but there's no replacement for modeling your data well and understanding the relationships between the data in your organization, and being able to extend that as as new use cases show up, things that we don't even know about yet. So it's really future proofing your organization and organizational data management strategy.
Great, thanks. And with that in mind, we often still sometimes hear these perceived drawbacks. Let's start with Julian on this one. Why are these perceived as drawbacks to successful data vault implementations in your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the skills and training, and access to skills in the market and all of those sorts of things. That's a challenge, I guess, for all of us. There's definitely a skills shortage here in Australia. I'm sure it's the same in the Northern Hemisphere. And so there is obviously Ignition is a training organization. We train people in Data Vault. There's ways to skill people up, but you still need experience. This is not a thing that is easy and simple to do, and so it's why partners exist as well to support you as you're on that learning curve. So that's probably one of the most common ones we hear is we have trouble finding people with the right skills in the market, and so that's very real, very relevant, but it's actually easy to address with with a training partner and a right sort of services partner to mentor your team through. After that, the other ones here are really probably left over from when Data Vault was just a modeling technique and it hadn't fully evolved. There used to be some challenges with getting data out of the Data Vault. There was some concepts that helped with joins in the structure to enable servicing of the data through to a BI tool. It was quite challenging, and you had to really understand how the Data Vault worked to actually make it work for your business. But now there's point-in-time tables and bridge tables and those sorts of things that exist. Also, the complexity of design is actually an interesting one, because there is a specific reason why Data Vault decouples all of the components in the methodology, and that is really isolation of issues, so that you can't come up with a change that cascades all the way through the platform. If you have an issue in one component of the architecture, you can resolve it there, and it doesn't impact the rest of your platform. And so, that might make it appear more complex, but it actually makes it far more robust. And so it does create multiple versions of the data, but that's actually a benefit, not a problem. So some of these things are perceived issues, and I guess you can go down rabbit holes on various forums, including the DVIC, on whether people like the fact that we have multiple copies of the data, but that it's there for a reason. It's been tested thousands and thousands of times, and it's there and it works, and that's really the important thing, I guess.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Even just on that last point about multiple data versions, I really don't see that as a drawback as much as it's really a strength of what Data Vault does, because you have your raw vault, your business vault, and then your InfoMart layer as sort of your major moving parts in a data vault. And with the ability, with some of the modern automation tools that are out there, you really have the ability to look at your data lineage. And so when I have a value coming out of my InfoMart layer into a dashboard and I'm saying, hey, that number's wrong, where did that number come from? I can trace it all the way back to the source data, which is something that you can't do with most other data warehouse models. And so really that to me is a huge value. If I can go back and I can see the data, how as it existed when it came out of my source system, to me, that's a huge value there. So definitely, I really don't see any of these as drawbacks that are relevant today. To your point, I think there are a lot of holdovers. But honestly, with all the clients that we've worked with over the years, really what we see is a lot of strength in these areas where organizations have embraced training and mentorship with good partners. They have wrapped their heads around the prescriptive nature of Data Vault, so the complexity really isn't that overwhelming to them. Once they've modeled a couple of things in a Data Vault, they're like, oh, rinse and repeat, and I know how to do this and continue to move forward. And it performs remarkably well. And then having that data lineage really is something that really makes Data Vault a strength rather than a weakness.
Hmm.
Thanks. All right, so let's get into some of the data that surfaced up from this survey. Let's look at this first chart. How do you see best-in-class companies utilizing automation to drive faster delivery of real business value? Mike, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. The big thing that jumped out at me from this chart was the fact that Data Vault's listed here. I think, you go back 10, 15 years, Data Vault was sort of a new thing. and it was still trying to get traction in the marketplace. And as we look at the history of data warehouse methodologies, starting with Bill Inman, who's sort of the father of the data warehouse concept, and he coined the phrase, and then we got to Kimball, and now we're at Data Vault. Really, Data Vault is a mainstream methodology for building your data warehouse. It's no longer sort of the new kid on the block. It's now the new best way to do it. And even Bill Inman, he says anymore, if you're going to build a data warehouse, don't do it Inman style, do it Data Vault, which is more relevant, more correct, and it's more business focused, which is really what you want to do in the end. So many organizations, they go into their data warehouse architecture with the mindset that they're going to make their data warehouse data look just like the source data. And when you think about how many source systems you're bringing in, and they're all developed by different companies and different developers and so forth, so you have this hodgepodge of different ways of architecting data. You don't want to bring that into your data warehouse and then try to do your analytics across a cross section of that data. What you really want to do is you want to formulate your data to look like your business, and you talk about your business objects in business terminology, and that's where your ontology and taxonomy come in. So really, what's happening here is we've seen the data warehouse methodologies evolve. What we're seeing is best-in-class companies are adopting Data Vault because it has that business-centric approach to it. So now that's not to say that the other things that are listed above Data Vault are invalid, because really Data Vault allows you to incorporate multiple design patterns. So you can have a star schema, for instance, in your Infomart later, and that's completely legitimate. So I wouldn't say that really Data Vault's a second-class citizen. I say it's a first-class citizen, and it's really going to eclipse these others that are on this chart in the next few years.
Thanks, Mike. Julian, anything that you want to add here?
Yeah, I would just quickly say it's obvious that if you look at tally up all the currently using, that it's well more than 100%, and that's very much every data vault that we deploy has dimensional models to service the BI layer. So we're using with Data Vault, but we're also using dimensional modeling. And it's actually, as Mike said, it's valid and actually endorsed or promoted within the Data Vault methodology. Also have, flat denormalized tables for data science activity that's, that can be fed out of the persisted staging layer and those sorts of things. So yeah, it's not necessarily an or statement here, it's more an and, but Data Vault is a wider methodology that covers not just what modeling technique, but actually what architecture, what set of processes are you using to actually, organize your teams and run the development process. So, yeah, it's not surprising that dimensional modeling is at the top, because it is the way to service data to a BI tool. But it's very much approved and incorporated into the Vault methodology.
Great, thanks, Julian. So the Bark and Eckerson survey found that these are the biggest challenges that surfaced up in the current analytic environment. Julian, I'd love to understand, what do you see working with your clients, the biggest inhibitors to effectively executing on a data strategy?
Yeah, I mean, data quality is going to continue to come up. We have an approach of helping people to work through their data quality challenges. It's usually a larger problem than you have budget available to spend on it. And that can be a real challenge, but it's about understanding where the data quality problems are and what the impact those are to your business. And so we've helped organizations to essentially manage their data quality rather than trying to solve everything, work out where the priorities for resolution are. And so that can be looking at the downstream financial impact of particular data quality issues and solving the ones that have a big impact, and not worrying about the ones that don't have an impact to your business. So it's a common thread, and it's a thing that business users keep creating for us, essentially. So unless we can get business users to change their approach to data entry and other things, then data quality is always going to be a problem. And we talked about dependence on few people and consultants, and I think the Data Vault Alliance and all the training providers globally are really trying to address that as quickly as possible by making training easy and accessible, and then the partners that are in the various regions helping people through mentoring and coaching activities and those sorts of things. It's not as big a problem as it was. it's a consumable exercise to get your team trained up in Data Vault. You just really need to think it's a two-step process. We need to get them trained, and then we need some mentoring to help them through the first few iterations. And as Mike said, that after that it becomes kind of cookie cutter. Yeah, so like they're obviously the two key ones here, and I think that reflects exactly what we see. They're the two sort of big issues. Mike, you've probably got a fair bit to add to this.
Yeah, yeah, and even to, expand on what you were talking about, just that dependence on few people, as I mentioned before, organizational turnover is going to be a reality for every company. And at the end of the day, you want to put in place a methodology that somebody can sort of parachute into, and it's recognizable and they understand how to continue to grow what was started maybe years before they joined that organization. So again, that's really where this third item, this lack of automation, comes in. So many organizations have been fearful of automation. We'll talk about it a little bit later in the presentation, but um, as you bring automation into your organization and start leveraging some of the great tools that are out there today, you're really going to find yourself in a place where that dependence on the people becomes less of a critical factor, because the tools are helping you be successful and the tools are keeping you on the rails and making sure that you're staying true to the data vault methodology. So really bringing in automation is going to help you in that respect. And then the fourth item down about shadow systems, that's a huge issue in a lot of organizations. And a lot of times the reason shadow IT stands up is because the real IT has lost credibility. And a lot of what's damaging their credibility is the fact that it takes them forever to deliver on a request. If I go to my IT organization and I ask for a dashboard that helps me exploit a market opportunity that I see right around the corner, and they tell me it's going to take 3 months or 6 months and get in line behind everybody else, I'm going to go off and find a way to get my answers some other way. And that's oftentimes what happens and that's what causes these shadow IT organizations to stand up. But by bringing in automation, bringing in a prescriptive methodology like Data Vault, what you're really doing is you're giving yourself and your team the ability to rapidly respond to those requests. So you can turn around those requests very quickly. And now all of a sudden, the real IT has regained credibility, and those shadow IT organizations stop popping up within the organization, so that ultimately you're going to start driving more value and you're going to be perceived as the right place for people to come that need value. So again, as you march forward with Data Vault and with automation and so forth, a lot of these things that are on this list are just going to start to vaporize because they just become non-issues anymore, or at least very minimally impactful.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Oops, sorry, I skipped past the last one. The survey also found this level of automation applied to the following aspects of data management. Mike, let's start with you on this one. How do you see best-in-class companies utilizing automation to drive faster delivery of
Yeah,
real business value?
it really jumped out at me on this chart, and I know there's a lot of color and numbers on this chart, but one of the things that really jumped out at me is that best-in-class companies, 70% of best-in-class companies are utilizing automation. And that says a lot for the direction that it's going. Automation, if you go back 10, 15, 20 years and you talk about, oh, I'm going to bring in an automation tool, a lot of people would snicker and say, I'll believe it when I see it. And we're way past that. Automation is a reality today. It's matured. And a lot of the tools that are out there in the marketplace today for building a data vault, they're very tried and true, and they're very reliable, and they do tremendous work at generating perfect code, thousands of lines of code with the click of a button. And no data engineer or data architect is going to be able to match that. I was at the Gartner Data and Analytics Conference this spring, and one of the things that stood out to me is that there were at least a couple dozen tools out there today for self-service data analytics, data science, data mining, and that's really where we're headed. Is it's a lot of low-tech solutions that enable non-technical users to start driving value out of their data. And what's really going to help companies continue to be in a position to exploit tools like that and to put powerful tools like that in the hands of their non-technical users is by really bringing in automation and bringing in a methodology that lets you format your data in a way that is easily consumable. We talked recently about data science. The industry is moving towards more data science, AI, machine learning, large language models, and so forth. And if you structure your data with the anticipation of ending up there as an organization eventually, you're doing a lot to position yourself to exploit these new opportunities that are right around the corner. And a lot of that starts with just automation, getting there quickly.
Thanks, Mike. Julian, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, we recently did a proof of concept on an automation tool, our automation tool, for a customer, and they'd been previously building their data vault manually, and their estimation was that the automation tool was 10 times the speed of what they've been doing manually. So pretty
Mhm.
significant, increase in speed or saving, depending on which way you want to look at it. So it's super important just from an efficiency point of view to make sure that you have automation. But there's so many other benefits: the consistency of the code, and the ability for someone else coming in to understand that. But it's also not just about the database code or the integration code. There's so many other areas that are starting to be automated, so automated data quality monitoring, and even I was seeing some people talking about automation of of initial models, so you can get a starting point for your data modeling, and and in the metadata space, and test automation, which is really being dragged out of the software development realm into data warehousing. So there's opportunities for automation to just continue to get better and make our lives all a lot easier when it comes to this, and we need it because the scale of the issue is getting larger and isn't going to slow down as far as data volumes or complexity. So if you haven't got a plan to get automated, then you need to probably rethink your plan, would be my advice.
Makes sense. Thanks. Okay, we're next going to move on to what's surfaced in terms of the team's primary reasons for choosing Data Vault. Mike, let's start with you on this one. Working with with infoVia clients, what do you see as the main business drivers for choosing Data Vault?
Yeah, and, one of the things that I really wanted to call out here as we look at this slide, and the next slide is talking about technical drivers, but I really want to focus on the primary business drivers for data vault, because a lot of time it's going to be your CFOs, your CEOs, your line leaders across your organization that are responsible for different parts of the business, and at the end of the day, they're all asking for the same thing, and that's speed of delivery. How fast can you get me the answers I need to make critical business decisions, or like I said before, to exploit those market opportunities that they see coming down the pike. And so, really, most of the clients that we have, they're looking for ways to make better informed decisions about their business. They want to know, what do I need to focus on? Where do I need to go to put out fires? And where can I create new revenue based on the data that I have today? I need those insights, and really being able to be in a position to deliver that quickly is really what's going to make or break a data strategy from a business standpoint. The other other points on here, like team skills, really what we're seeing with our clients is they look at Data Vault, and then just as part of their due diligence, they'll look at other methodologies, they'll look at other partners and so forth, and oftentimes they come back and they say, Data Vault just makes the most sense. We understand the methodology, we understand the tools, and we understand that we can take everyone from our senior to our junior engineers and bring them along on that journey, and we know that we're going to have a good result coming out of that. The last one I want to just highlight here before handing it over to Julian is the improved ROI. You know, kind of continue to beat that drum about automation. When you have a project that lasts a shorter duration and requires fewer people because you've brought in good automation tools, you're going to get more return on that investment because you're going to have less investment and a shorter project. And that just can't be overstated. We see time and time again where we've talked to people that have built data warehouses before, or even data vaults before, without the leverage of automation tools, and they're amazed at how much faster it goes. We do a lot of POCs for our clients, and what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll say, hey, give us 10 of your tables, 10 random tables, and within a day and a half, we build them an end-to-end mini data warehouse. Everything from ingesting the data to putting transformations on the data, building an Infomart layer, and then putting a dashboard on the tail end of it. And they're just absolutely amazed at how fast that process goes. And that really then plays out on a grander scale when you talk about a much larger program that involves an enterprise-wide data warehouse with multiple projects, multiple business units. It just happens so much faster. So your ROI is just incrementally greater as well. Julian, your thoughts?
Yeah, the two that really connect with me here are accelerated delivery and the improved ROI, because they're the ones that are really linked to a business strategy. All the others are really about education, about people either learning about Data Vault, skilling themselves up, doing their research, those sorts of things. And so there's kind of two key ones here, I think, is the accelerated delivery and that link to ROI for the business. They're the ones that really drive your strategy, and that should be the reason why you're choosing it. You need to know that you're choosing it because it aligns with your business strategy.
All right, let's now then dig into the technical reasons for choosing Data Vault. I'll start with Julian on this one. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I have a little saying that if we start using buzzwords, we haven't listened enough to the customer, and we can't talk about their language around their systems. But obviously, in this scenario, and we have lots of people online, it's we need to be more general. But when we say things like extensibility and scalability and flexibility, what we're really saying is that the model has the ability to absorb new data sets without an impact to the existing data within the model. That the infrastructure has the ability to scale up continually to to essentially any volume of data you can imagine and any number of sources that you can imagine, and that we're insulated from change in any one of those source systems or any one of the use cases coming out of the warehouse, that changes don't cascade all the way through the architecture and cause re-engineering. So they're really, when we're saying extensibility and scalability and flexibility, that's really what we're talking about. And they are really critical factors to why Data Vault works, because you never have to go back and rework what you've done in the past. You can continue to extend it and add to it, and the stuff that's already in there just works. And then the new stuff that you bring in. And so I explain that often as, if you have a new data source, you either have somewhere to put it because it fits perfectly, or you can create somewhere new to put it and connect that to the rest of the model. And that's all there is to it from a modeling perspective. So I think they're the big ones as far as I'm concerned. There's obviously lots of other components too. We've talked about, data quality and governance and all of those sorts of things. But yeah, I would think they're the big ones. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of times we're trying to encourage our clients to, look for early, quick, easy gains. Validate what you're doing, prove to, your stakeholders that you made the right decision choosing Data Vault and this automation tool over that tool and so forth. And a lot of that ultimately comes down to really being able to rapidly validate what you've done and being able to often and frequently validate what you've done. And then the other piece of this really is around agility. We want to encourage our clients to not try to boil the ocean. Don't go in thinking you've got to build this whole enterprise thing before you ever turn it on and turn it over to your users. Start with one thing, one dashboard or whatever it is, and let's back into the data. Let's pull the data through, let's transform it, and let's get it to where it's usable to your users, and then move on to the next one. And because of the fact that Data Vault is extensible, scalable, flexible, so on and so forth, it really lends itself well to that approach where you can fail fast and then you can deliver value quickly and you can adjust on the fly. And then that way, as I've said before, 5 years into your Data Vault, you're still creating hubs, links, and satellites that look like first-class citizens, like they've been there from the beginning, because of the fact that it just lends itself well to an evolutionary growth.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike and Julian. That concludes the portion of the presentation of talking through the results of the Bark and Eckerson survey, and we're now going to get into learning from Mike and Julian's experiences kind of in the trenches. So let's start with lessons learned. Julian, we'll start with you on this one. When you're coaching a new client in a Data Vault implementation, which points do you emphasize here in terms of lessons learned?
Yeah, and I think Mike was just talking about it. Is don't boil the ocean is the one of the key ones for me. We also are very we refer to it as thin slicing in Ignition. It's kind of one of the key mandates we must do is thin slice, and so that really means take a small number of tables and deliver a single use case, and then repeat that process as many times as you need until you have an enterprise data warehouse. Don't try and do a big bang scenario. It just never works. We've had some organizations we've worked with who decided that they were going to load all of their source data into the vault, and then they'll start delivering reports to the business. And the business doesn't want to wait around for a year or 18 months for IT to get its act together and state that it has a perfect warehouse now and is ready for reporting. That just doesn't work for anyone. So I would say that's a really critical one, and automation comes very much in line with that. If you have an automation capability and you can define a single use case, you can promote that through in hours or days. It's not a big exercise. And so I think the challenge there often is getting the business to state a single use case. And we've seen this quite often, that we've explained thin slicing, and then an organization will turn around and go, that's great, we just need this dashboard, and it's only got 8 tabs and it's only got 30 elements on every tab. And well, that's not quite thin slicing. Maybe if we do a single report element at a time and these things build up, then the business is actually engaged, and we embed a prototyping approach to that process as well, so that the business is actually engaged on what each element of a report might look like, so that they can state whether it's right or wrong, or fit for purpose. So they're the big ones for me, I'd say.
Yeah, I would go along with that as well. And one of the big things that we help our clients understand is stop looking at your data as data and start looking at it as business objects. And that's where this business centric approach comes in. And that kind of goes hand in hand with taxonomy, which is just a fancy way of saying use business terminology when modeling your data. So if you're in the warehousing business and you have products and warehouses and drivers and vehicles that deliver your products, then that's what you refer to your hubs as, is those business objects. And then your satellites become sort of that data that describes those hubs. And when you start doing it in those terms, when you get to those conversations with your business, now you're both speaking the same language, because your business doesn't want to know about tables and columns and schemas and all that nonsense. They want to be able to talk about those products and vehicles and drivers and so forth. So really change your mindset, get out of kind of take off your technical hat, put on your business hat, and talk about building out your data vault in a way that makes sense and resonates with your business. And then really have your business owners engaged from the very beginning. So often we've seen clients where they're like, okay, I got to go model my data. I need to ingest my data. I need to transform my data. Now I'm going to build my dashboards. And then they engage the business. And now they spend tremendous numbers of cycles just trying to get their business to understand what they're trying to deliver, and trying to figure out, how do I shoehorn my business needs into what I've modeled, rather than having the business involved in the beginning, so that when, if I know that these are the elements that need to be on my dashboard, I'm going to be talking to my modelers early on, make sure, hey, you need to grab these data points, you need to model them in this way so that they flow through naturally to my InfoMart layer. And we've just seen that clients that embrace that type of approach with the way they run their projects really causes them to be more successful. There's less thrashing, and inevitably you're going to have challenges around documenting your business rules and transformations and stuff, and that stuff takes time, and you can be doing that in parallel with the modeling exercise, so that you're actually delivering value more quickly, rather than pausing the project, figuring out all your business rules, and then going off and building a dashboard on top of it. So the other big piece of this that we don't talk about enough, and one of the things we're trying to do with our clients, is help them really look more holistically at what they're building. The big thing here is, so often clients will come to us and say, I need a data warehouse, or I need to replace my data warehouse. And we're like, great, let's get started. And then we get halfway through it, and it's like, okay, now let's talk about all the other things like data governance, access control, BI, and so forth. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, time out, I'm out of money and I can't ask for more money. I've spent all my budget. And I kind of lightheartedly say, it's kind of like you ask me to build you a barn and then you don't save enough money to buy the horses to put in the barn. It was like, what was the point? And so we don't want clients to be there. So one of the things we do is, early on, we help them understand, think holistically about what you're trying to deliver and what's necessary for you to deliver value, and what's necessary to protect your investment. And that's where the data governance comes in. That's where access control comes in, and so forth. And if you bake that stuff in from the beginning, one, you're only going and asking for budget once, which nobody likes to ask for budget. And secondly, you're really kind of taking a holistic approach to how you're going to build it out so that you bake those things in along the way rather than sort of bolting them on after the fact. So again, it's just so important to really look at the big picture, keep your eye on the horizon as you're marching toward it, and make sure that you're really thinking about all the moving parts so that you get there and you've got this complete solution rather than just one piece of a more complex thing that you wished you had.
Thanks, Mike. All right, let's move on to modernization strategies. Mike, we'll start with you. What themes tend to resonate most with clients when formulating a data strategy?
Yeah, well, and like I was kind of just beating this drum about a holistic view of what you're trying to do, so I won't go back there. The other piece of it though is really future proofing what you're doing. Don't always defer to what's old and tried and true. It's like, I was saying Bill Inman, he says, don't do Bill Inman anymore. Even though Bill Inman was the thing, decades ago, he's saying now don't do Bill Inman, do Data Vault. And that's really important because as we look at what's coming, in terms of industry and evolution of technology and so forth, we're marching towards AI, predictive analytics, self-service analytics, things like that. You really have to be prepared for that. And that means that you're going to have to think about technologies that might be newer, think about methodologies that might be newer, but really what you're trying to do is you're trying to future proof your investment so that you're not spending lots of money today only to find that it's inadequate, your solution's inadequate 2 years down the road and you have to reinvest. So that's going to do a lot to damage your credibility as an IT leader if you're not more forward thinking in that regard. The other thing is look at emerging platforms. A lot of times in the past, people are like, oh, I'm just going to go um, you know, hardcore data center on premise with my own iron. And today there's so many good cloud platforms out there like Snowflake and Databricks, Azure Synapse, Redshift, and so forth. And really what we want to do is we want to encourage clients to start looking at some of these other platforms as a target solution for you. This is a great time to be moving to the cloud if you haven't already done it. And there are a lot of good tools that help you get there. And there's a lot of good partners out there that can help you get there smartly so that you make the right decisions for your organization.
Great. I'm going to keep moving here because I want to make sure we allocate some time at the end. So, Julian, I'm going to turn things over to you to talk through. In the survey, we saw that 2/3 of best-in-class companies are using automation tools compared to the laggards. What are you
Hmm.
seeing as the primary advantages to using these automation tools?
Yeah, I think we've probably covered quite a lot of this, but the automation tools obviously they speed up your team, but they actually deliver consistency in the code. Means the code is very readable, it's very supportable, and so and as Mike said, if someone parachutes in, 10 years or 5 years down the track, they can understand what's been done. Uh, the automation tools also tend to deliver better governance assets as well because the metadata around it is extremely consistent. So producing lineage, to support the understanding of the business or the identification of issues is far easier if your metadata is all the same structure. And so it doesn't just make you faster, it makes the whole platform more supportable and it improves the quality of it. So it is really at this point a no-brainer. You should not be doing data vault as a manual exercise.
Great. We're now going to move over to success stories. So, let's start with Mike. Oopsie, it's not building there. Success stories. Yeah, but Mike, can you talk to us about reflecting back on working with clients and what we've been discussing today, whether positive or negative? Talk us through some of the success stories that you've experienced.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and fortunately, there's a lot to choose from because when we see organizations do it right, it's just a brilliant thing to see. We have one client that's in the real estate space that they came to us and they had a team that had never done Data Vault before. They had not worked with any automation tools before, and we actually sat side by side with them, with our architects and engineers, mentoring them through the process. And as I say to so many of our clients, we fade out as they fade in. And by the time we rolled off that engagement, they were really competent to continue to evolve their data vault and to continue to move forward and continue to drive value for their organization, which was great. And one of the pieces of feedback that we received was how thankful their team members were that our architects and engineers work with them to sort of bake in those best practices and basically made them habits for them, so that where they were calling each other out and saying, oh, no, 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 that's not the way, this person said to do it or that person said to do it. And that's really validating to hear clients say that they've embraced those best practices and they've adopted them as their own. In another very different case, we had a client that had no IT staff at all, and they basically asked us to take on building their data warehouse for them, an entire enterprise data warehouse, and then take on the care and feeding of that going forward as a managed services partner. And so really what it gives us the ability to do is come in and sort of meet the organization where they are. If you have a team that needs very little coaching and just some guidance from an architecture standpoint, we can do that, all the way to mentoring your team or really owning the end-to-end build out of your solution. Where we've seen that fall down is when a lot of organizations will come in and they'll say, "Hey, I'm going to try to go it alone without a partner," and really, what they end up doing is they end up struggling tremendously. And it's not that Data Vault or the tools themselves are difficult. It's just that you need a little bit of hand holding to get yourself started and to move forward. And what we've seen is those clients that try to do it with minimal amount of a partner involvement tend to really struggle and flounder, and they have to come back and re-architect, and they have to come back and keep asking clarifying questions and coaching questions because they're just not getting it because they're trying to do it too much on their own. So again, it's not just a shameless plug. It's the reality of what's out there. Is you really need a good partner to help you get it right the first time and to move quickly.
Makes sense. Thanks, Mike. Or Jillian, what about from your perspective with everything that we've discussed here today? What are some success stories that you
Yeah.
can?
Well, quickly, I think our smallest Data Vault customer has a single person who's building their data vault. He has an automation tool, and he's had training, and he's really good at building data vaults now. And so this isn't just the massive end of the town, but similarly, we work with Australia's largest banks, and they have not just one enterprise data warehouse; they have multiple. It's hard to call them enterprise data warehouse, but they have multiple data warehouses. And in several of those cases, they've started doing a Data Vault project for a particular department, and now we're seeing Data Vault being used in more and more cases across the one of those banks, and so that endorses the methodology and the scale, I think, of the approach, and that's its value. It's useful to an organisation that has 100 people and one person who deals with data, right up to organizations that have thousands of employees and large teams, and it works exactly the same process works in both cases.
Mhm.
Thanks. Well, Mike, you kind of already teed this up for us, but the importance of trying to not go at it alone. So let's start with Jillian to get your feedback here. What distinguishes the two type of organizations and their degrees to success in terms of going at it on their own or bringing in a partner?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, we're obviously the training partner in the APAC region, and so if you're in the APAC region and you need training, come and see me. Um, but and we would definitely say that training is very important, but I would also say training isn't enough by itself. It's really important that you leverage the experience of someone who's done this before. The application of the methodology to the technology tool set that you decide to use. There's some considerations there and ways that Vault is applied to various technologies, and you need to leverage that. So you need a strong architect. You also need assistance in modeling. A lot of these automation tools, in fact, I would say all of the automation tools, rely on the data modeling process to be done well. And so the mentoring that you can provide your team or get from a partner is really important as well to that success. And then just the processes that you need to put in place, even from how you engage with your business and gather requirements. You want to have a requirements gathering process that directs people towards thin slices, and that can often be a challenge. Most IT teams understand agile now, but lots of business teams don't understand agile at all, and they just want to know, when is this thing done, which is very kind of high level waterfall kind of thinking. And so that those are the sorts of things where a partner can step in and really help.
Mhm.
Anything you want to add here, Mike?
Yeah, just maybe a different spin on it is it's so important to vet the partners you're considering. True story. We worked with a really large healthcare system here in the United States, and they hired one of the big three consulting firms because those firms always say yes, we do that. And then they looked for a partner that they could outsource to, and they found another partner that said yes, we can do that. And then they reached out to us to say, can you do this? And we were able to do it. And so we actually came in as the sub to the sub. And at the end of the day, the client realized that we were the ones that were actually doing the work, and they wanted to kick the other two, including the big three consultant, to the curb and have us work directly. And we're like, well, unfortunately, contractually, we can't do that. But it just sort of emphasizes the point that it's so important to really vet the partners that you're considering, ask for references, validate that they know what they're talking about, and really put them to the test. Make sure that they can actually deliver on what they're promising to deliver, and that they're not going to just sub out everything to somebody else, because all that's going to do is add margin, and it's going to add to your cost, which is going to cut into your ROI. Maybe putting it another way is, a lot of these consulting companies out there, strategic partners, however you want to look at them, they really focus on, I'm just going to build stuff forever, and I'm going to get all I can out of this opportunity for me rather than for the client. A good friend of ours in the industry, she says, don't build, deliver. And that's so important, is when you have a strategic partner, you're paying top dollar for top expertise. And so it's so important that their emphasis is on delivering value and not just continuing to build stuff. So put them through their paces, ask for references. And the other thing too is you can really reach out to the community. There's some great communities out there. There's the Data Vault Alliance, the Data Vault North America Users Group, Data Vault Innovators Community that Julian has spearheaded, and there's several others. There's several in Europe as well. You really can find Data Vault user communities pretty much on every continent. Maybe not Antarctica, but give it time. So I would just definitely encourage you to vet your partners well before you sign on the dotted line.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, I just messed up the slides here. We are now going to move into the Q&A. We got some good questions that came in. So thank you, Mike and Julian. Let's start with the first question was, do you see the value of key data processes like governance in master data management? If so, how does Data Vault utilize these processes?
Hmm. Again, as I said before, and Julian, definitely want to get your perspective as well. You really want to look at your data strategy holistically. So, master data management is going to factor heavily into your data quality, because you're going to have to clean that up in order to get that golden record. Um, and same thing with your data governance. At the end of the day, if you're not creating something that is more broadly useful to your organization through data catalogs, access control, data quality initiatives, um, things along those lines that fall under that broad umbrella of data governance, then you've really sort of had a stunted vision of what you're trying to do for your organization and what you're trying to deliver value on. So, Julian, what have you seen there?
Yeah, this is a great question because I think it touches a little bit on the concept of data mesh as well. The idea of centralized governance for your information across your enterprise, I think is central to everything you're going to do. So there's multiple dimensions to governance. Obviously, data quality is one of them, but your taxonomy. Your business rules, your access control, which I know is a really important thing to the infoVia team with the InfoSecure tool. All of those things, how you actually manage access, how you prove that values are correct, how you can master information, how you can manage the quality, all of those things is really important. And you don't want to do it in isolation for a silo, even if it is the enterprise warehouse. You don't want to say, well, we've got all this governance just for the warehouse. Those governance processes need to filter out through the business. And we actually try and make lots of business users part-time stewards involved in the governance process. So they're, if they want to come up with a new metric, then they need to define what the metric actually is. And that definition feeds into the governance process. So Data Vault will support those initiatives by providing really strong technical assets to support governance, like the lineage views, like the ability to reconcile and audit, an individual value back to its original source, all of that sort of stuff. So it'll feed into that process, but governance is a business function, and it really needs to probably take a more central part in people's thinking when they come to their information management strategy. And so the master data management one's an interesting question, because we used to do a lot of MDM projects, and we'd do single view of customer and single view of product, and we would try and federate the updates of a customer's record out to all of the source systems, and it was a big data integration project, and we're not doing those anymore, because I think the effort is outweighs the value in a lot of cases, not all cases, obviously. But what Data Vault allows you to do is apply business rules to your raw set of data. And so some of those rules can be matching rules. So you can create a single view of anything you want, whether that's a product, an asset, a person, and you can apply those business rules. They can be matching, they can be quality, those sorts of things. And then you can use that golden record in any service you like. And I think that's the way that MDM's morphed, from being kind of a way to try and synchronize all of your source systems on a single record to actually, how do we just consolidate a full view? You still need the same stewardship around that, and that feeds into the governance process. And so, data mesh is promoting this idea of centralized governance, and Data Vault makes it possible. I know that at the DVA conference earlier in the year, Roche Pharmaceuticals were there talking about their data mesh, and that's a really good use case, because they're obviously a huge company. I think it was 40 data product teams, and they're using Data Vault to make mesh work for them. So,
Thank you. We had one question come in that I can definitely ensure we get to, which is this copy of the slide. It's going to be shared, and yes, tomorrow we will be sharing the slides as well as the recording and the survey as well. We'll also be asking for a feedback survey. We're looking to do more webinars in the future, and really want to hear from you. What do you want to hear from us? How can we help you on your data journeys? I think we can get to one more question. And again, if you do have a question, just use that Q&A box, because we will get back to you on the conclusion of the webinar. So don't want to miss getting to your questions, but let's get to one more and then we'll close out here. How is Data Vault 2.0 better than Kimball or Inman methodologies? Who wants to take a stab at that one?
yeah, I'll have a quick go if that's all right. I think we kind of addressed this in that, Kimball essentially defined a warehouse as a set of dimensional models. And what we do now is we use the dimensional models for what they're really good for, which is delivering data to a BI tool or an analytics platform. And so the Kimball idea hasn't gone away. It's just being used where it works well. The problem with doing an entire warehouse in dimensional models is that you can't resist the urge to source from one dimensional model to feed another dimensional model. If that fact or dimension is already in that model and you need it somewhere else, you just grab it from there rather than rebuilding it for the next one. And so all of the dimensional models become interconnected. And then when something changes, you have changes rippling through the entire set. And that's probably the biggest challenge. But as a delivery mechanism to a BI tool, Kimball or a dimensional model makes perfect sense. And I think, as Mike's mentioned several times, Bill Inman has defined what an enterprise data warehouse was and created an approach to doing that. And effectively, Data Vault is the next evolution of that. And Bill's endorsed that. And I had a good chat with him, and Mike had a good chat with him at a conference earlier in the year. It's he's very much on board with Data Vault as the evolution of his original idea.
Yeah, I would just add on to that, and you kind of hinted at it, Julian, is so often what we hear from people that have taken a Kimball approach is that it just becomes incrementally complex over time. And while maybe it's straightforward to architect in the beginning, by the time you get 5-10 years into it, it really becomes just another one of those brittle black boxes. And it becomes very difficult to maintain. And when you start stacking dimensions on top of dimensions, now you start impacting performance as well. So Where Data Vault sort of solves those things is everything stays very flat across your Data Vault. You don't start stacking objects, and on top of that, you don't have this incremental complexity because everything is geared around these concepts of hub links and satellites. As you bring in more data sources around a common business object, let's go back to our warehouse idea before. If I've got a warehouse hub and I have warehouse data coming from 5 different source systems, all I'm doing is adding more satellites in the orbit around that hub so that it continues to evolve and the data is available. But I don't have this incremental complexity coming in just because I've added more source systems that talk about that same common concept. So great question.
Yeah, great question. I want to thank Mike and Julian, all of you for attending today's webinar. Again, we will share the recording, the slides, the survey, and then be also asking for your feedback, what we can help you with in the future in terms of creating some great content. Thank you again for everyone's time, and we look forward to connecting with you in the future.